Hi Sam.
Hello, Tony. How are you
Hello.
doing today?
I'm good. Let's see if we can get this right. Thank you for agreeing to be on the Challenging University podcast, first episode with the new name. So thank
Oh,
you.
I'm honoured, privileged. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, it's been great.
Uh, so we've worked together a little bit, so we know a little bit about each other. But for the listeners today and the listeners to come, could you please share what your full name is and what it is that you do today?
Yeah, certainly. So my name is Sam Darling, Darling. Interesting enough surname. Growing up with Captain Blackadder and other things at school, that was great fun. Luckily, I'm a very big chap, so 6'6" and quite heavy. So yeah, I've managed to solve many an argument at school growing up with that. But yeah, wanted to share my experiences as to my education experiences for those who might be interested, and to see and discuss, share with you how it is that I ended up doing what I do today, and whether that had any relevance to university or not. So there we go.
Okay. And what is it that you do today?
So I'm currently a cybersecurity specialist within the Advanced Solutions team at TD Synnex. And for those of you who don't know who TD Synnex are, we're the largest global distributor of IT, software and hardware and services, currently doing around $65 billion a year in turnover globally.
Okay, biggest company that you've never heard of. I've heard it described
Correct.
as a
Yeah, very
huge
much so.
organization.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we always start by going backwards in time to your memories of, and normally we start with memories of secondary school,
Hmm.
but you do have an especially interesting educational story. So feel free to start at the point where you think
I
your story
remember.
begins.
Yeah, it's relevant. Yeah, so I grew up in a RAF household, so a member of the services. My dad was a pilot for Queen's Flight. We're based out of RAF Norfolk. The Queen's Flight was called 32 Squadron. And for many folks who have grown up in that environment, you run the risk as a family of being posted abroad at a moment's notice, literally a moment's notice. And as parents at the time, my mum and dad thought, right, that may have an impact on education, that may have an impact on where we live and friendship groups and things. So the Air Force offer options for those families,
Mhm.
and the option is that of a boarding school. So at the age of 7, I was actually shipped off to a boarding school, waved to mum and dad goodbye on the
Oh,
driveway, and went
don't do
inside
that.
for the next few years to basically cut my teeth and learn how to be quite independent and grow up really. So that's sort of where it started, and the environment in which I found myself in and struggling in, to be honest. So yeah.
Mm. And where were you at school? Where was your
Yeah,
boarding
so
school?
it's sort of always around the home counties, sort of around from Northallerton and RF Rice, near Ruislip in North London, but also out towards Bishop Stortford. So it was a prep school. It was about 2 hours away from where we lived at the time, and therefore, when you go on school holidays, which of course from a boarding school's perspective typically are a little bit longer, so you
Hmm.
break up for the holidays earlier and you go back later. You don't know anybody where you live because you don't go
Yeah.
to school there. All your mates are miles away and dotted around the globe because it was quite a
Mm.
sort of global attendance at the school. And yeah, some of them were actually sort of picked up in the family's helicopter and taken home. Some of
Okay.
them were chauffeured home,
Yeah.
and my mum, bless her, would turn up in her gardening frock in the Nissan Micra, or possibly the Volvo if we were
Yeah.
feeling plush and we could afford the fuel,
Yeah.
to go home for a weekend, perhaps. So, yeah, slightly different reason for being there, really.
Mm.
Circumstance.
And for those and actually I think and to pause on this a minute because lots of people have ideas about what boarding school is and the types of families that send their children there.
Mm.
However, as you've shared, there can be a mix. So you were from a forces family. I have a friend actually, he went because his dad was in the Navy, Royal Navy,
Yeah.
Royal Navy. Um, so I'm intrigued to know, was it sounds like it wasn't just services families at the school.
No, not
You
at all.
were
No. So, yeah, there was actually a really good mix. So, some of the families were scrap metal merchants. Some
right.
of them worked as sort of captains of industry.
Hmm.
Some of them worked in fuel and energy production. So, yeah, I remember one chap. He had his favourite chef in South Africa make a meal for him and had the meal flown onto the boarding school grounds so he could have his favourite meal. We,
Wow.
I remember sort of, some of the kids talking about Reebok Air,
Mm.
and Reebok pumps, where you had the
Yes, I
tongue of the
remember the
shoe and
little
you pump them.
basketball.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we had Asda Air, Tony.
Uh,
It's
yeah.
very opposite end of the
Yeah.
spectrum, but it was interesting to meet those people, understand
Mm.
their lives and where they came from, and
Mm.
when the rare occasion came up where we could actually spend some time together, it was a case where we could sort of just share stories really and just figure out what we're all about. So it's a good melting pot, a mixing pot.
Yeah. And I guess at that point in time, you are all children
Yep.
who are there, but who are there because your parents have made a decision for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Um, what was expected then for you? Did you stay within the private school system?
No,
What was
I
next?
hate it because just not really kind of having much to compare with, or didn't
Mm.
really kind of gel and get into that sort of world that much. So I also felt that being uh, tarred with the same brush is not the right word, but I always felt that I was sort of pigeonholed. So if you like, I was always a big chap. So when I was 11, I hit 5'11".
Oh,
I
wow.
played rugby quite a lot, so I was quite a big
Yeah.
chap, quite strong.
Yeah.
And I think it was quite keen or quite clear to me that they wanted me for just more than my academic ability. So I was, to be honest, one of those
Mm.
individuals that found myself in sort of year group, one, and then it would be set Y, and then set
Yeah.
four of set Y, and then year group two, set
Right.
Y, set four. So
Hmm.
I was actually taken out of some of the things like Latin and classical civilization to try and learn, and actually I was taken out of those classes to go and learn just the core subjects, English, maths.
Mm.
And I actually had a special needs teacher, Mrs.
Hmm.
Waller. So big shout out to Mrs. Waller, God bless her.
Yeah.
She, I'll be honest, Tony, she kind of cured my dyslexia.
So did was your dyslexia diagnosed? Did
Yeah,
you?
so I went through all
Right.
the formal tests and the education boards and things, and yeah, mildly, dyslexia, I should politely suggest, but I always struggled. So having that extra time in the exams, having those extra
Hmm.
lessons with Mrs. Waller, she taught me the tricks, the tools. She equipped me with the
Yeah.
tools to be able to sort of succeed really and get going. And then, to be honest, this was sort of at the time where computers were starting to being used, so it was a little
Yeah.
while back, hence the grey hairs. But when spell checkers came about, I was relieved. It made my life a lot easier. It took a
Mm.
lot of the guesswork out and trying to learn the shape of words. As
Yeah.
in, the
Okay.
tall spiky letters, short letters, trying to learn the
Right.
shape of words, it took a lot of pressure off. So actually, that opened up a lot of mind space, so I could then absorb more. So yeah.
Okay. So you're in an environment where they've gone. He's a tall, well-built lad. He'll play rugby. But you've got the extra help learning with
Yeah.
dyslexia and how to kind of like you say use the tips and tricks um, that would work for you.
Yes.
Where where do you go from there then? Because you said you
Yeah.
don't feel you
So
kind of fit in. It's not right for you.
yeah, absolutely. I think I
Yeah.
also it was an all boys school, so that had a
Okay.
certain element to it,
Yeah.
which made me, as I was growing up and becoming a sort of
Mm.
young teenager, I was thinking, crikey, there's a whole wide world out there. So I'll be honest, I actually begged my mum and dad. I said, look, please take me out of this at the next natural
Mm.
break in the sort of year
Mm.
groups, and just put me in the normal local school.
Yeah.
And at the time, my dad had actually been posted out, luckily in the UK still, but we'd moved from Ruislip out to near High Wycombe, a place called Marlow
Hmm.
on the River
Hmm.
Thames, which, funnily enough, now is where Softcat have one of their main offices. So it's a sort
Yeah.
of small
I've been
small
there.
world, this, isn't it? There we
Yeah.
go. So I grew up in Marlow, and I literally begged them. I said, look, I've got to go to the local school. I want to meet some girls. I want to realize what normal paced education is like. And
Hmm.
I couldn't wait to just get into that normal environment of going to
Mm.
the local school and getting to know some local friends, some of
Yeah.
whom I still know today. So, yeah, said goodbye to boarding school, walked
Yeah.
into the local secondary school, Great Marlow, at the top of the hill,
Hmm.
and really flourished there. Really had some great teachers, had some great mentors, who looked after me and understood, what I was up for, and interested in business studies and IT,
Hmm.
and that really sparked my passion for using IT equipment, being involved in this world as IT distribution as well. So it sort of
Hmm.
sparked that journey really from an education perspective. I did all right, you know. Had some
What
fun.
what
It's good.
what did you do for GCSE? Oh,
Yeah. Oh, God, Lord. It was like 11 of them, I think it was. A couple of them
wow.
a year early, all of them
Yeah.
A to C grades. So
All right.
at, at that stage, I seem to have some sort of academic ability, but yeah, not the brightest tool, not the sharpest tool in the box, but I did all right.
Yeah, well, I would say if you took a couple early, I'm kind of, it's interesting because what I really like is how you said, you had that diagnosis of dyslexia, you were given the support that you needed, and then it's not kind of got in your way, held
No.
you back.
And actually
Mm,
putting me in the right environment that
mm,
enabled me to sort of continue learning and developing in my way.
yeah.
I actually stayed on at that school to do the sixth form college as well because
Ah,
I could
okay.
feel that it was a sensible progression. So I
Hmm.
did an extra couple of years, did a GNVQ. So this
Yeah.
was sort of in the days. I don't think I'd have done well at A levels, but I
Okay.
think a more sort of practical applied learning
Yeah.
seemed to suit me with
Yeah.
sort of coursework that you could build upon rather than just a memory test.
Yes.
And a sort of, pardon me for saying it, it's a horrible term, but regurgitation of, things. You just got to see how much you can retain and then,
Yeah.
get it all out on paper. That's not the way my brain works best. So,
No.
yeah, I think that sort of coursework and, continuous assessment is quite useful for me in my learning.
And what did you do your GNVQs
Yeah, so
in?
that it sounds really glamorous, but I'm sure it wasn't. It's advanced business studies with IT and French. So I ended up working in
Right.
France for a few months as well. A few
Okay.
others went over there. So I worked for AXA Assurance in a place called Marly-Laura, which is
Hmm.
the twin town of Marlow. We stayed in a auberge de
Ah,
jeunesse for a few months,
yeah,
and there was four of
yeah,
us in total, and we went over there and enjoyed some
yeah,
nightlife, had some really good nights out, worked during
yeah,
the day and I was sort of partnered with a chap, French chap, Stefan, who's doing an international baccalaureate.
yeah.
And it
Hmm.
became very clear to me there was a big difference between a GNVQ and an international baccalaureate.
Okay,
So yeah, I just sort of acknowledged my place in the world at that point and thought that's where I'm comfortable, that's where I'm good. I'll focus there. So yeah.
okay. And out of interest, then, so is the International Baccalaureate more challenging or
I
just
would say so,
different?
yeah. It requires a,
Right.
a different level of academic ability, in my opinion. That was my
Okay.
experience at the time. So, but yeah, it was good from
Okay.
an experience perspective to be out living in France at the age of what,
Yeah.
18 or so. It's
Yeah.
really good times. And culture, music,
Yeah.
food, learning
Yeah.
some language. So it's
Yeah.
good.
Très bien.
Yeah,
Um,
merci.
um, what was the expectation then? Now, because your story does differ from some of the other people we featured, and the
Bless you.
listeners will
Yeah.
hear
Well, this
this.
is
So,
why.
what's
Yeah.
next?
I really appreciate you sort of inviting me on to discuss this because I guess I fit in the sort of group of, well, actually, I did, but I kind of didn't, and I didn't
Mm,
really succeed or like it there, so I kind of jumped out early. So let me just
hmm.
explain on that. So, yeah, at the end of university, I didn't really have a clear direction, but what I had been doing is working in a local business all the way through school and college.
Mm,
And the owner of that business actually said to me, "Look, what are your plans? What would you like to do? Because there's an offer of
mm,
another business arm that you could go and run and have as a, manage it on your own and work with me on it." And I was sort of bowled over by that. I thought, that's
mm,
incredibly generous. So I sort of sat down and took stock of the options really, and without any clear indication or pathway that I chose, it
mm,
was sort of, I don't know if I was encouraged or it just seemed to work out that it was
mm,
not necessarily expected, but just seemed to make sense to go to university. But I
mhm,
didn't want to leave that job. I
mm.
had several girlfriends I mean, I had a girlfriend in the area. I wanted to go and continue to work in the area. I love
Yeah,
the area, so why on earth would I want to go and move away to
yeah,
university and do something like that? So I decided to commute. So
yeah.
I actually drove from Marlow into the Chalfonts to the business
Hmm.
school at Buckinghamshire University. And yeah, I somehow, Tony, signed up for an international marketing degree with French, IT, IS, all sorts of things. So
Wow.
yeah, not quite sure
Yeah,
how and why that happened, but I'll be honest, I
yeah,
did bite off more than I could chew.
yeah.
Um, yeah.
And I'm intrigued. I'm just making some notes here
Mm.
because you've kind of had a clear, it would seem, a clear kind of theme throughout your education where said you enjoyed IT, you enjoyed business,
Very much
you
so.
started working with a local business. And then for your GMVQ, Advanced Business Studies, which I didn't even know was a thing, with French as an international flavor. And then you've gone on so for an international marketing degree. So there has been that clear, I guess, route into the world of business.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I guess from my perspective, it was a case of these are the things that I found interesting. These
yeah,
are the
yeah,
things that I was learning about outside of education as well. And
yeah.
that's really where the conflict started to happen, to be honest, because
Mm,
I'd been helping managing this local business. We had some fantastic success in terms of PR. We had
hmm.
some really good contracts with some massive global names. We had,
Yeah.
you know, Rank Xerox, we had Nokia, we had Motorola on our books. You know, we were
Mm,
doing all sorts of corporate hospitality. We had a leisure and tourism side to the business. We had
mm,
servicing and maintenance and repairs. So, although it was a local business, it was actually boxing way outside of its sort of, you know, its
yeah.
champion weight. And we had some really good success over the years. We even wrote a book. So
Hmm.
myself and the business owner, we wrote a book when I was 16. It went to print and press, and we did really well with that. It was stocked by WH Smiths and local stationers, so we had an income from a book that we'd written.
Yeah.
And
Well,
it,
and the book, is it still in print? And if so, what's it
no,
called?
it's on its third edition now under a slightly different guise, but this
Right.
was back in the early to mid 90s, so it's a long while ago, but
Hmm.
it did very well for itself, and yeah, I was really grateful for given the opportunity to do that.
Mm,
So having learned all of this and being so close to it and being involved in it outside of education, all the way through my education,
yeah.
really from the age of sort of 16 and upwards. At
Yeah.
university, this is where the conflict came. So I was learning so much about business in the real world, actually doing
Yeah.
it, you know, part
Yeah.
time in the evenings, after uni, after
Yeah.
college, at the weekends. And I could really start to see myself having a career in that space. Yet at
Mm,
university, being asked to study quantitative methods and, you know, producing reports on marketing plans for
mm,
perfume companies, it just didn't seem to correlate. It just didn't seem to mean anything in terms of the real world. So that's where my
mm,
sort of conflict started really. And the subject matter in terms of business and IT and using equipment, fantastic. But I was already doing that in my day job
yeah.
and doing very well at it. And I kind of disenfranchised. I was, you know, not really
Yeah.
impressed by what I was doing at uni. So yeah, not
What
very
did your
impressed.
lecturers think of you not being impressed with what
Oh,
you're
I had
doing?
some fantastic arguments, really humdingers, I think they could be described as. So,
Yeah.
one of the chaps was talking to me about special offers and value versus cost,
Yeah.
and we had this brilliant argument over the special offer and toilet rolls. And you know, he's trying to argue his case for buying 18 toilet rolls for the price of nine was a better offer than three for
Yeah.
the price of two, or something like that.
Yeah.
And I said, but if I buy 18 toilet rolls, I'm going to need to
Yeah.
buy warehousing. um,
Yeah.
you know, where do you store all these things? And if you scale that
Yes.
up, where does that problem? He didn't like that one bit. We had a good
Right.
argument in the classroom there about that. And
Yeah.
another chap started to talk to me about whether a cup was half empty or half full. And
Okay.
I argued that it depended on the previous state, because if it was an
Right.
empty cup and you poured it half full,
Hmm.
I'd argue that it's now half full. If you had a full cup and you tipped half
Yeah.
out, I'd argue that it's now half empty. He didn't
Yeah.
like that either. So yeah, we had some really good arguments, and I just didn't see it applicable to real world at all. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
There's a philosophical thing in there, isn't it? About if you're a glass half full person, you think, well, everything's a bonus, but if you're glass half empty, you think something's been taken away from you.
yeah, I'm at a loss. Yeah, that's what,
Yeah.
didn't like that.
Wow.
He didn't like that
Okay.
one bit. But yeah,
Okay.
I was very lucky. I had a
Yeah.
good year tutor, a year head.
Yeah.
So I sat down with her one day and said, "Look, I've kind of reached a point now where I'm wanting to leave, and
Yeah.
I'm learning more outside of these four walls, and I'm learning
Yeah.
inside them.
Yeah.
What have I got? What do I need to
Yeah.
get in order to not waste the last 2 years?
Hmm.
And how do I kind of manage this? You know, manipulate it. How do I get something out of it?"
Yeah.
Um, so it turned out I had nearly enough credits for an HND, and I thought, right, you know, absolutely fine, and
Hmm.
basically left with my diploma up my arm, and thought, thank you very much, I'm off,
Yeah.
and yeah, put plans
And
in
and
place.
that's see, this is something that I didn't know was possible. And I've been speaking to people kind of about what the options are when you're at uni. I've got lots of friends whose children are either there
Yes.
or have not gone or are thinking about going.
Mm,
And I didn't know that you could say, I've done 2 years. Can I convert this into something? Because I heard somebody say, you mustn't waste
mm,
2 years and and then leave.
yeah.
So it's not necessarily wasted, is
Certainly for me at that
what
time,
you're
yeah, it was well
saying.
worth having that
Yeah.
conversation because for those who literally
Mm.
dropped out and disappeared, they would have left with potentially, if they were only a few credits away from what have you, then they'd have
Yeah.
wasted a lot. So it's, please, 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 I encourage anybody out there, have the conversation with those that are there to support you. Don't be
Yeah.
afraid of reaching out and just talk to people about it because there are people who are very knowledgeable, they're experienced in this world about what are the options, what is
Yeah.
achievable, what's available to you. And
Yeah.
forgive me, I can't remember her name, but she just sat down and said, "Yeah, okay, let's have a proper good look at where you're at the moment."
Yeah.
And all of my credits that I'd accumulated at that point,
Yeah.
it was, I think I had two or three more assignments to do, pieces of work to produce, and then that was it.
Yeah.
And I thought, fantastic, I can leave without having wasted that time and leave with my head held high.
Yeah.
But yeah, I couldn't wait to leave. To be honest, Tony, I was literally gasping to, chomping at the bit to get
Yeah.
out there in the real world of business and start cutting my teeth. So yeah.
And so at the point you left, so you've left, you've got HND, so nothing has been wasted. You have a job anyway, so you've been earning the whole time.
Mm.
Um, what happens next? Do you
Yeah,
continue?
you kind of sit down and go, "Ooh, now what?" You got
Yeah.
to take stock, haven't you? And you got to sort of take a moment and think very clearly what you'd
Mm-hmm.
like to try and do. So, in my opinion, it's the what have I got so far? What skills have I got? What transferable skills do I feel like I can offer?
Mm-hmm.
Even if they'd been perhaps chiseled and honed in one industry, perhaps they're applicable and relevant in another.
Mm-hmm.
So I sat down, spoke to my family, my friends, and the employer of the business that I was working at, and he encouraged me. He said, "Look, why don't you write to the suppliers,
Mm-hmm.
the vendors, if you like, of this business, and see what opportunities are out there in the commercial side." So
Mm-hmm.
wrote my CV out, had a couple of drafts of that put together, got some help, making it look right and sound right, and making sure it's all
Mm-hmm.
relevant and concise. And yeah, a lovely little company on the south coast got in touch. I went to work in Bristol for a little
Mm-hmm.
while, and the similarities, would you believe, within the cycling industry and the leisure and tourism
Mm-hmm.
industry and the IT industry are very, very similar. So we have
Mm-hmm.
distributors, we have vendors, we have brands,
Yeah.
we then have resellers or retailers.
Yeah.
Sometimes they've got retail premises. So there are some really common themes there where I found, what I'm doing today very similar, and
Yeah.
working in that sort of distribution supply chain. Um,
Yeah. And
so yeah,
and you were supplying lots of tech firms from what you said when you were working for the
yeah,
cycling
absolutely.
company.
Yeah, it was a case where I went off to work with some of the really really industry leading brands, and
Mm,
there was actually a distributor that I worked at who had about 300 different brands on their books,
mm,
and supplying them into retailers and resellers in the UK.
mm.
So yeah, very very similar, very parallel really. Very
Yeah.
similar setup, so everything's familiar. It's good.
Yeah. And what was your first step into the tech world then?
Yeah, so my mum died. So in the cycling industry, in the leisure industry, my mum was unfortunately diagnosed with cancer. This
Mm,
is around year 2000, 2001,
mm,
and it's very cliquey. It's a very small industry. Everybody knows
mm.
people. So I had to go to a lot of these shows where colleagues, friends, acquaintances were sort of saying, "Oh, hi Sam, how's your mum?" So I had to sort of
Yeah.
share with them that news and and the update that she'd unfortunately passed. And I just
Mm,
wanted a bit of a clear break from the
yeah.
cycling side. So I actually rode my bike around France in a bit of a nod,
Oh,
and did a lot of travelling around the UK as well. And
yeah.
after a few months, got back with only a few hundred quid in my pocket, and I thought
Yeah.
I better take life seriously, make mum
Yeah.
proud. And I walked into a local recruitment agency, would you believe, in
Yeah.
Milton Keynes, in Buckinghamshire, and I said, "This is me. This is my
Yeah.
background. This is what I've been doing.
Hmm.
Um, any suggestions?" And they said,
Hmm.
"Have you heard of Ingram Micro?" And again, you,
Ah,
you joked
right.
earlier, you said
Yeah.
TD Synnex, one of the largest companies nobody's ever heard of. Well,
Yeah.
again, Ingram Micro is a bit like that,
Yeah.
ever so slightly smaller, but yeah, similar of scale.
Hmm.
And went to work for them in their account management team, SMB sales, so small to
Yeah.
medium businesses, small to medium
Yeah.
enterprise. Um, and I was really grateful for the opportunity. I actually worked with some great people. So Barrington Atkinson, bless him,
Hmm.
um, Bhavesh Patel, a
Hmm.
few others, sort of stalwarts of the industry,
Mm.
and yeah, really sort of enjoyed my time there. Started to win Spiff prizes, Tony. So
Yeah,
Spiff prizes,
love a
being able
spiff
to
day.
love a Spiff day, able to take some Canon prizes home and bits and pieces, and
Um,
yeah, I really enjoyed my time there and met some good friends who are now, still friends with today.
we
Um,
should we should say, I'm going to have a guess. Spiff, sales performance
yeah, incentive or
incentive.
yeah,
F- f-
focus, yeah, focus, whatever,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Do
Spiff
you,
day, yeah.
do you think that, because you said you've completely sort of switched industries, and do you think that the tech industry is somewhere where it is perhaps easier to get in? Or because I know lots of people say, oh, I ended up in tech, I fell into tech. I went into tech from freight forwarding. So I wonder if there is something about the industry that is perhaps a little more open to
Yes,
people
it's
from other
inclusive,
backgrounds.
definitely, and I think there's a massive appreciation of diversity within the sort of
Mm,
tech industry as well. Certainly within
mm,
cybersecurity now, really
mm,
heavily recognised as a sort of skill set that's worthwhile adding into cybersecurity around diversity. So that's very prominent. I think it's just good transferable skills. It's able to
yeah,
conduct a conversation, hold a conversation with peers as well as
yeah,
people who are higher up in the organisation, an appreciation of the technology. I've always been a bit of
yeah.
an adopter of technology. I like technology. I like using it
Hmm.
because it helps me, in certain areas of my life. So I like that. Um,
Mm,
and I think as an employer, certainly a local employer, both TD Signus and Ingram Micro do a great job of recruiting local and inclusive talent because
mm,
even most recently in one of our company updates, our MD, David Watt, said, we want our local offices to represent the local recruitment area, and that's
mm.
important to people. So, because people
Yeah,
do business with people, don't they?
they
So,
do. They do.
yeah.
Um, you're winning your Spiff prizes,
Yeah,
taking home your Canon stuff,
that's it.
being
Going on
yeah,
holidays. Yeah.
snap happy. Yeah, going
Mm.
on holiday, vouchers for M&S.
Johnny Palmer race
Um,
days. Yeah.
yeah,
Captabond vouchers. Yeah. All of those
yes.
things.
Oh
Yeah.
my goodness. Um, where do you go from? How does that lead you down a route into cybersecurity?
Yeah, so after a few years, I was promoted internally, thankfully, to business management. So
Hmm.
I looked after launching a vendor called Acer Computers into
Hmm.
the UK channel, which was great
Yeah,
fun, challenging. They always wanted a sort of month's worth of inventory in the air, on the sea,
right.
and in the
Yeah,
warehouse and under your desk. So I think a lot
yeah,
of people working in the time would have felt that pressure.
yeah.
And yeah, it was great fun, learned a lot. And at that time, actually, an opportunity came by because the Sony business manager was leaving the business to go and work in Ingram Micro Europe. And I was asked to look after Sony, and it was an
Hmm.
interesting one because when they sort of handed the franchise to me, they said, "Oh, look, this won't ever become anything." I was like,
Mm.
"Okay, how come?" Well, we've never really got anything from them. We've never really engaged. We've never really had any traction. We've never really done any business. I was like, "Okay, well, let me sink my teeth into it and let's see what happens." And within 12 months, we'd hit target with Sony for the first time in 14 years.
Wow.
So they were very, very pleased with their performance.
Yeah.
And yeah, just brought in, some really good success stories internally.
Hmm.
And then a lovely value add distributor. So if you imagine at the time, Ingram
Yeah.
Micro would be widely recognised as a broadliner. A value add distributor got in
Hmm.
touch in North London called Computers Unlimited,
Hmm.
run by James Sanson and his team. Chap called Alan Clark got in touch, the commercial director, and he said, "Look, would you be interested in doing similar things that you've done with Sony and Acer, but for us, would you like to come work with the Apple team here, along
Mm.
with consumer audio and other brands?" And we do a lot of business with Apple Store,
Hmm.
so on third-party products. So that sort of led further into the IT distribution channel. But then 2008, 2009, the financial crisis hit,
Yeah.
and I thought, okay, this is where the world goes slightly bad. And I was
Mm.
in the world of selling high-end consumer IT equipment and
Yeah.
consumer audio equipment at a time where the banking financial crisis sort of
Yeah.
hit. So, in all honesty, the writing was on the wall. It was very
Yeah.
clear. So I took an opportunity to go and do something different for a few years. So I set up my own
Hmm.
business, ran my own business for 11 years.
Wow.
I was in the cycling world again, so did that.
Okay.
That was a sort of
Doing what? Just like this has come from out of the blue. What?
Yeah, so ran my own business for 11 years. So I had an idea, very low OpEx, very low
Yeah,
cost of startup,
yeah,
and sat down with an accountant one day and said, I think this will work. What do you think?
yeah.
And yeah, let's go for it. So had 6 pints of cider to tell my wife what I was trying to do, and said, look, this is an idea that I've got. I think it'll work. Oh, and by the way, I've fashioned an agreement that's given me the ability to keep the house over, the roof over our heads for a
Mhm.
good few years. Why don't we give it a go?
Yeah.
And that Thursday night, we found out we're pregnant.
Oh,
So it
wow.
was a
Okay.
perfect timing where I could work
Yeah,
from home, work the hours I chose, see both children grow up and be part of
yeah,
that, and be around for them.
yeah.
And yeah, it was actually in the cycling world, so I ran my own business. It was also a training business, so I worked very closely with a company where we delivered internationally recognized training qualifications, to sort
In
of reduce.
cycling?
Yeah, well, in cycle maintenance and
Right.
and repairs. So basically,
Yeah.
to reduce litigation across the cycling industry.
Ah,
So I did
okay.
that for a little while. That's great fun.
Yeah.
And then COVID hit, and it was like, good
Okay.
Lord, these big storms, right? These things are sent to
Yeah.
test us. So
Yeah.
when COVID hit, I thought, right, I
Mm,
heard the headlines that the people who are trying to develop the vaccine were
mm.
under cyber attacks. And that
Uh-huh.
hit a nerve I just couldn't let
Yeah.
lie.
Mm.
That is like the lowest of the low, isn't it? We're trying to save
Yeah.
humanity,
Yeah.
and these people are going after these
Yeah.
centers that are trying to develop the vaccine. And I kind of saw the light between the IT distribution industry as well as cybersecurity,
Hmm.
and thought, right, that's it. So luckily, I was approached by a company down here on the south
Yeah.
coast, a European antivirus vendor. They said,
Yeah.
look, come work for us. So I had to learn a hell of a lot really quickly. Had some fantastic teachers. So thank you to Ben and Alex and Will and Darren.
Yeah.
They taught me a lot, and they're really good teachers. So just going back to that university and challenging university theme, I've learned so much from the best teachers who are outside of education.
Yeah.
I hold them in very high regard, on a
Yeah.
pedestal.
Yeah.
And at the time, that's again just a reminder to me of the conflict I felt at university of learning so little, and that
Yeah.
I felt was relevant for the real world. Whereas out in the in the real world, in business, I had these
Mm.
fantastic mentors that were able to share and impart their knowledge as subject matter experts with me. So, picked up cybersecurity. Absolutely love it. Really, really have a passion for it. And for the last 3, 4 years,
Picked up. Yeah.
yeah, to it.
Can I ask a question because it's going to bother me, and I think
Mm.
people listening might go, I want to know how that happened. How did you stay on the radar for people within the tech industry when you're running a business that is focused on the cycling community? How does
Yeah,
that work?
so good old LinkedIn, and even just
Ah,
sort of just personal messages, and
yeah.
events that I'd go to.
Mm,
It was quite clear when we had the training side of the business, people were visiting, our workshop and coming from all over the world
mm,
to gain this qualification. And
mm.
funnily enough, actually, one session, Tony, you'll love this. One chap turned up, and as I was doing my introductions, I said my name, darling, people
Yeah, yeah,
remember it, and he said,
yeah.
"I've got your book." And he just sat bolt upright and looked up at me and goes, I've got your book. I was like, oh, come on, you're joking, aren't you? And he said, no, no,
Yeah,
no, I've got a copy. If I bring it in tomorrow, would you do it? I was like, oh, please. And I thought it was a wind
yeah,
up, but yeah, bless him. So yeah, all walks of life and just keeping in
yeah.
contact with friends and, Patrick and Matt at Ingram Micro, I worked so closely with over many years, just keeping in touch. They come to the wedding, they come to the funerals,
Yeah.
they go to the events, and when we catch up every now and then. So that was just a way of keeping up to speed and see what was happening. But certainly the
Hmm.
cybersecurity industry moves at such a pace, and it almost a completely different pace to the IT distribution world as well. Every single day in cybersecurity, there's something
Yeah,
happening. It's really
yeah.
volatile like that.
And I think this is great sort of area to explore and something that, you and I have spoken about before. But if you were to sort of listen to some people in education, they would say, oh, well, so they would look at you, Sam, and say, well, he must have a computer science degree. He must have.
Nope, and neither a
But you
requirement to
don't,
have one either. So
yeah, you don't need one. And I think it's this emphasis, as you say, when you were doing your international marketing, you were doing that at the same time as operating in a business
Yep.
that worked across Europe.
Yep.
And there are some things where I guess it depends on if you're learning the basics or you're learning methodologies or best practice or things like that that are useful. But as you say, in cybersecurity, we know that it is moving so rapidly and the point of entry is becoming very sort of the cost point of entry is becoming very low.
Very much so.
Anyone could launch a cyber attack now. You can't spend 4 years at uni
No,
to,
you'd if you started that journey, a 4 year
yeah,
journey now, it would be
yeah,
it would be 3 or 4, 5 times out of date by the time you finished it compared to what it was started at, it started at. So, no, I don't
yeah,
believe that's a requirement now. Just so we're clear on this, I believe that when it
mm,
comes to professional certification and qualification, for
yes,
example, if you want to be an analyst
yeah,
or an incident response, individual within cybersecurity, then absolutely there may well be a requirement and perhaps compliance regulatory kind of enforcement where perhaps you need some letters after your name. But in order
hmm,
to actually work and actually have a career within cybersecurity, no, you do not need a computer science degree. You do not need a whole load of letters after your name. It's a
yeah,
fascinating world. It's ever so dynamic. And
mm,
in fact, actually, if you look at the most recent recruitment campaigns from the likes of Bank of America,
hmm,
GCHQ, the National Cybersecurity Centre, they actually go about writing their job adverts
mm,
in a specific manner that is going to attract those with ADHD, ADD, dyspraxia, dyslexia, autism.
mm,
So they are recognizing the value of a neurodiverse workforce within cybersecurity. And it's the
yeah,
fact that, pattern recognition, recognizing certain behaviors within a threat as the analysis takes place. A neurodiverse audience looking at that and more than one set of eyes. Don't just give it to one person in the team to have a look at it.
yeah,
Share that same problem amongst the team. Get different perspectives. That's really, really important for cybersecurity. In fact, some of the most fantastic speakers that I've heard present at keynote speaks, within cybersecurity. The first thing they do is they walk on stage and they say, "I can't read, I can't write, I can hardly make head nor tail of what I'm here to talk to you about today, but I'm an expert in cybersecurity, and this is what I'm here to share with you today." And their
yeah,
message and their story is absolutely relevant. It's applicable, and it's relatable as well because people are,
mm,
it's in the headlines. People know that
yeah.
this is happening and it's frequent.
Yeah, and something that sort of strikes me about the work that you do is, well, from my perspective, it seems like you do an awful lot of helping to educate other people.
Yeah, I have a real passion for that. It's something I want to
Mhm,
share. I was the beneficiary of many of these good teachers
mhm,
and people who imparted their knowledge and understanding with me. So I feel almost duty bound to sort of share some of it onwards and upwards. So yeah, I'm currently, would you believe now, 16 episodes into a series that I've written
mhm.
around cybersecurity awareness. It involves the really nasty stuff that you find on the dark
Yeah,
web, some of the services around ransomware and denial of distribution of service, denial of service attacks,
mhm,
the phishing attacks as a service that are available on the dark web. And then it goes
yeah,
through crypto mining and cryptocurrencies and how Bitcoin's affected the planet and what
yeah,
we do in cybersecurity. And really, one of the most popular ones is I quite like coming up with interesting names for these things, Tony. So
mm.
one of them I've called "We need to discuss your behaviour." And when you send that as a subject line on an email to
Yeah,
somebody, whether it's a partner principal or a director, they sometimes take note quite quickly and they
yeah,
go, "Good Lord, what have I done?" And it's
yeah,
around behavioural EDR, and it's understanding how our solutions track and
yeah,
monitor behaviour to the point where they can start to predict next steps. So if a
yeah,
threat was received here and it went there and then it tried to do this, well, what's
yeah,
it likely to try and do next? And if that's encryption, if that's password, if that's exfiltration of data out of somebody's estate, we need
mm,
to understand the techniques and the tactics and procedures used, these indicators of compromise. So again, just a fairly niche area of cybersecurity, but absolutely
mm.
fascinating, incredibly relevant for what we're talking about today. And I'm sorry to say
And
it, but I didn't learn a thing about it at uni.
and
Sorry.
are they in the public domain?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
They are. So listeners could
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've written
in
the
and
series. Some of
access
them are
them.
recordings. Some of the content is pretty close, bit edgy, should we say. So some of them
Mm.
will have censored slides, but yeah,
Yeah.
they can get in touch with us at TD Senates and have a listen to them. And to be honest, the most value is actually on face to face. So we're doing
Hmm.
an event coming up at the Churchill War Museum,
Yeah.
and I'm hoping to do a piece around behavioural technologies there. But yeah, it's a really fun,
Great.
interesting series for people, and the feedback so far has been very, very, very positive.
Fantastic. Um, you mentioned that you have got children.
Yeah,
So when I speak to people who are parents, I ask, how do your experiences inform the kind of advice you might give to your children? This assumes that they're willing to
yeah,
listen to it.
yeah. So I guess, okay, each their own here. Okay, little disclaimer. Okay, this is my
Mm,
opinion and my thoughts.
mm,
I and my wife are in the same agreement that we won't put pressure on our children to go through higher education.
mm,
If they want to, fine. We'll try and facilitate that as best we can. We'll
mm,
try and encourage that if they want to go down that route. But I
mm,
certainly won't put pressure on them, and I'll never
mm,
make them feel that they should or would need to do that.
mm,
Especially, to be honest, based on my own experiences,
mm,
and even some of the most fantastic colleagues and businesses that I've worked in, the individuals. Even higher up the food chain, they're not
mm,
necessarily ex-university. So, to me, and graduates. So, to me, it's just not a necessary part of life now.
mm,
I genuinely challenge that thought. I think for my two children, chalk and cheese comes to mind. So one is
mm.
currently learning how to do Japanese maths with me.
Wow.
Very different approach. I set him a challenge the other night for a treat, and he absolutely nailed it. And I thought, okay, he's very capable. He's just doing his sats,
Right.
and he was expected to overachieve. And the
Yeah.
other one does the most fantastic pictures and paintings you could ever wish for. And you think,
Yeah.
okay, yet equal and opposites, no strength in
Yeah.
the opposing
Yeah.
subject. So I think you've got to realise as a parent what strengths each child has and that they are unique and different, and support
Mm,
where you can. Gentle encouragement, a little bit of support, definitely.
mm,
But yeah, strong encouragement. I'd feel
mm,
quite against that, to be fair.
mm.
I would welcome them to get out in terms of work at the earliest
Mm.
opportunity, whether it's part-time work, cutting your teeth in retail, dealing with the great British public.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot
Yeah.
of us who have grown up in that space have benefited, I
Yeah.
believe, from working in that, and it's a good
Yeah.
grounding. It teaches you a lot from an early age. Um,
Yeah.
how to conduct
Yeah.
yourself, how to treat people, treat others as
Yeah.
you'd wish to be treated. So I'd,
Yeah.
I'd really encourage that from them. I'd probably perhaps put a little bit more effort into ushering them along that path, in
Mm,
terms of working from an early age, alongside whatever level of education they want to continue to. But
mm.
yeah, I'm not really going to put any pressure on them to go to uni, I'm afraid.
Yeah. No, and that's something that I find, I think it is that, you're working in a sector and within a discipline that is like an extremely is desirable um, industry to work in, and it's an industry that's growing and
Yeah,
that needs fresh talent. It's constantly recruiting,
mm,
and you don't have to have
correct.
a degree education in order to do that. But I loved what you had to say actually about professional certification and
Yeah,
that kind of
absolutely.
thing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
this goes sort of down to any sort of industry or any sort of professional avenue. So to be a barrister, to be a lawyer, to be a solicitor,
yeah,
you would have to go through a certain pathway of learning,
mm,
and have the right letters after your name, right?
yeah,
And I think there are roles within cybersecurity that would require that. I'm doing a
mm,
piece recently in the next few weeks about a day in the life of a pen tester,
yeah,
a penetration tester, for those who aren't familiar with it. And certainly those guys have had to go through a certain process and
yeah,
learnings to be able to get to that position in life and do that role. But again,
mm,
there are plenty of other roles within cybersecurity where it's absolutely not required, a
mm.
requirement for that. So yeah, get into it.
Okay. Well, I've got two more questions for you.
Go for
The first one is, what do you think has held you in good stead throughout your rich and varied career?
it.
Because it has been
It's
published
different,
author,
yeah.
cycling industry, business owner,
I think positive
cybersecurity.
attitude, definitely being positive,
Mm,
approachable, recognizing one's strengths, weaknesses,
mhm.
and I just can't help. but thank mum and dad for giving me a good starting in life. I think, I was lucky enough to have that good basis,
Mm.
and sort of background. But yeah, find an environment in which you can flourish, and for me right now to have such high level of support and encouragement from the leadership team within TD Senate, bless them, they've just given me an award. So I've just won European Cybersecurity Champion Award within the business,
Wow,
which is really,
congratulations.
thank you. Yeah, it's just really nice to sort of get that recognition, and I personally thrive off that. I really like that.
Yeah,
Chuffed to bits with it. So I was like, hey,
yeah.
great. First thing I did is said to the kids, oh, come and see this. And yeah, I think find the environment in which you flourish.
Yeah,
And don't be afraid of just saying, do you know what, this isn't working out.
yeah.
Let's cut and just take stock again. And Andy Holbrook, who is a colleague at Sony that I work with very closely, who's actually ex Computer 2000 back in the day, so
Oh, right.
pre-Tech
Yeah,
Data, same company.
yeah, yeah,
He taught me a lot. Great
yeah.
individual that I got to work with, and he was actually a barber before he joined Sony. He
Oh,
was cutting
wow.
hair, and yeah,
Wow.
he did 7 partner event presentations for us at Ingram
Yeah,
Micro, verbatim, back to
yeah,
back, an
yeah,
entire day of these Sony presentations. And I said to Mandy,
yeah,
that's almost inhumane. How on earth did he do that? He used to
yeah.
be a hairdresser. And he's
Right.
just,
Just
where are you going
good
on your
old day.
holidays? Yeah, just talk all
Yeah.
day. Yeah. And he,
Wow.
yeah, great individual to work with over the years, many years ago. So
Mm,
yeah, just find the avenue in which you're comfortable, get the right environment in which supports you and encourages you, and embrace that, deliver
mm.
back. Definitely.
Right. Okay. And my last question is,
Yeah.
and you may not wish to divulge
Oh,
the answer to this. Um, what's next?
oh. Okay, that's a lovely
Secret.
question. I'm gonna lay my heart on the line actually, and I'll say I am about 2 inches away from my dream job.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Very,
Wow,
very
that is
close.
exciting.
So
Wow.
from TD Synnett's perspective, in my current role, talking about cybersecurity, as a business development manager, my dream job, I think, would be cybersecurity evangelist or
Mm,
cybersecurity champion, however you care to pronounce, whatever
mhm,
that description is now, but to deal with the dealer part and the partner principals that we deal with, and to increase awareness, because so many of the corporate slide decks that we sit through in the channel, I'll be
mm,
honest, I just don't know if they're really relevant nowadays. I think the way that
mm,
people like to learn, that it's often
mhm.
story based. They want something that they can
Yeah.
relate to, and having a corporate slide deck is very important at the top levels.
Mm,
I absolutely understand that need, but when it comes to getting people to get on board and
mm,
come round to our way of thinking, perhaps
mm,
realizing what else is out there, and seeing the broader view of cybersecurity and the threats that are out there and what's happening in the world.
mm.
I think there's a certain approach there there's a gap that needs filling, and I'd love to fill that gap. And I'm hoping that in the very near future, that might lead to something. So yeah, fingers crossed.
Wow. Yeah. Well, that's it. You've got to put it out there, haven't
Yeah,
you?
basically, yeah.
Um, yeah. Well, that's been fantastic. Any final comments or advice for, let's say, well, if you want to get into cybersecurity, you want to be looking for GCHQ adverts. But any initial, I guess, kind of guidance if there is someone that's saying, I want to get into cybersecurity, but I don't know where to start.
Yeah, I think easily accessible and often for free are the vendor certifications and accreditations.
Yeah.
Again, not necessarily industry recognized or sort of academic accreditations and qualifications, but the vendors certainly have some pretty decent training programs out there. And we as TD Synnex have an academy as well. So if partners want to learn more, we have an academy where people can sign up and do some training. And even listening to my episodes around cybersecurity will help inform a lot of people about things that they didn't necessarily understand was the threat. So there are loads of sources out there, and happy to help in any way I can. But yeah, I think the last message I would like to say to any parent that's dealing
Mm,
with children at university is, you know, never be afraid of just sitting down and doing that little review of where you're at, what's happening and where are they at, where, what have they obtained so far? Because if it's not working out for them, to be able to
mm,
change direction, change path, don't be afraid of exploring what opportunities are out there,
mm.
and just find the right environment in which every one of us as individuals can succeed. I promise you it works. It's just
Yeah.
the graft. You got to go and
Yeah.
cut your teeth at it.
Awesome. Well, That was really enjoyable. Thank you so much for your time, Sam.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on, Tony. I really appreciate it. It's been lovely to speak to you about it.
Great.
Thank you.